When I told my parents my wife had been killed and my son was barely alive, they said they were too busy celebrating my sister's bridal shower. A week later, they demanded half of the settlement meant for my son's recovery. Hey Reddit, I've been sitting on this story for a while, not sure if I should even share it. It's about what happened after my wife's accident, how my family handled it, and how things went completely off the rails. It still feels unreal sometimes, but I think writing it out might finally get it out of my system. I, Eric, 32 male, live in Phoenix, Arizona. I run projects for a construction company that does residential builds. It pays decent, keeps me busy, and I actually like seeing something solid at the end of a week. I'm not rolling in yachts and Teslas, but I'm good. Bills are covered, fridge is full, Theo has his Legos, and Diana always made sure our house felt like home. Diana, my wife, she was 29, a nurse at the hospital downtown. One of those people who somehow remembered every patient, every grandkid's name, even which food made them gag. Then there was Theo. 7 years old, Lego maniac, always covered in marker smudges because he liked to design on himself when paper ran out. Smart kid too. If you saw us from the outside, you'd just think normal. Now, my family. That's where steady ended. My parents never really got their act together. Dad bounced between delivery jobs, warehouse shifts, and random handyman gigs he never finished. Mom did some bookkeeping here and there, but mostly stayed home. They lived like bills were optional and always 1 week from disaster. Patricia, my younger sister, was the worst of it. 28, part-timer at a salon, still living with them, claiming she was going to make it big as a lifestyle influencer. She had the lights, the ring stands, the fake designer bags bought on credit, all of it. No audience, no plan. Just vibes. Here's the thing. For over a decade, I've been their go-to safety net. Rent late? Call Eric. Car broke down? Call Eric. Patricia maxed her cards on hair extensions and brand investments? Call Eric. I became the bank without even meaning to. And I played along, because in my head, that's what responsible sons do. You build your life, you help the ones who couldn't. I told myself it was temporary. Spoiler, it never was. Diana hated it. Not in the yelling kind of way, but she'd nudge me with comments like, "Babe, you're not their dad. You don't need to save grown adults every time they screw up." I'd shrug, send the money, and move on. Guilt ate me every time I said no, so most of the time I didn't. The last straw before everything changed? A few months ago, Dad pawned some of my power tools. He said he borrowed them to cover rent and would get them back. These weren't cheap Home Depot drills either. I had specialty saws and routers that I'd built my work around. When I found out, I lost it for about 10 seconds. Then I calmed down and replaced them myself. I told myself, whatever, it's family. But it sat in my chest like a stone. If you've ever had someone take from you and then act like it's nothing, you know the feeling. Meanwhile, Patricia was busy planning her big bridal shower. Yeah, she was engaged to Timothy. Nice enough guy, came from money, lived in Tucson. I honestly thought he could do better. But whatever. Not my circus. My parents made the whole thing sound like the event of the year. Catering, decorations, invitations, the works. All for Patricia, the girl still living in her childhood room, who couldn't even keep a full-time job. They bragged about it like it was the royal wedding. Every conversation I had with them turned back to the shower. Eric, you'll come, right? It's going to be beautiful. You know, this is a big chance for our family to show Timothy's people we're not, struggling. Yeah. Imagine hearing that from the same people who borrowed my credit card just for groceries. I didn't push back. I had Diana and Theo. Anna. That was my focus. Family drama, background noise. Or at least, that's what I thought at the time. Here's the thing. I can handle pressure on the job. Missed deadlines, messed up orders, weather delays, I fix it. But dealing with my own parents treating me like an ATM while acting like Diana and I were too perfect in our little house? That ate at me in ways I didn't even admit out loud. Diana saw it, though. She always did. One night after I got off the phone with Mom, she wanted me to help cover more shower costs. Diana leaned across the couch and said, "Babe, you've been carrying them your whole life. At some point, they either walk or they don't. You can't keep being the crutch forever." I laughed it off then. I wish I hadn't. If I'd listened, maybe I would have cut the rope sooner. Maybe I wouldn't have been so blindsided when everything went sideways. Because 2 months later, one phone call turned my whole life into before and after. It was a Wednesday. I was on site in Scottsdale, overseeing a kitchen install. Custom cabinets, marble counters, the kind of job where the homeowner walks around like they're inspecting an art gallery instead of a place to cook spaghetti. My phone buzzed in my pocket. unknown number. Normally, I let those go, but something in my gut told me to answer. Is this Eric Sterling? Yeah, who's this? This is Sergeant Daniels with Phoenix PD. There's been an accident involving your wife and son. We need you at St. Joseph's Hospital immediately. For a second, I thought I misheard. My brain latched onto the word accident like it was something small, like a fender bender. But then his voice tightened. Sir, your wife didn't survive. Your son is in critical condition. Everything around me blurred. Tools, sawdust, the hum of workers, all of it vanished. I dropped my clipboard. My phone almost slipped from my hand. I don't even remember leaving. One of the guys told me later, I left my truck door wide open, engine running. I must have driven, but I couldn't tell you how. Next thing I remember, Hunter was at the hospital parking lot, pulling me out of my truck. He's been my best friend since college. Played ball together before my knee gave out. He's a firefighter now, the guy who doesn't flinch when everything's chaos. He just said, keys. I'm driving. I didn't argue. Inside, a doctor sat me down. His words sounded like static. Diana had picked Theo up early for a dentist appointment. A delivery driver, company truck, known safety issues, blew a red light at full speed, hit Diana's car broadside. She died instantly. Theo was pulled out unconscious. Severe head trauma, broken bones, internal bleeding. They had to put him in a medically induced coma to reduce brain swelling. Next 72 hours are critical, the doctor said. That phrase stuck in my head, echoing. I walked into the ICU and saw my boy hooked up to more machines than I knew existed. Tubes everywhere, beeping monitors, nurses moving fast. His small body looked swallowed up by the bed. I put my hand on his arm, and it felt cold. I broke right there. Hunter put a coffee in my hand. I never drank and started making calls. He called my boss. He called Diana's parents in Colorado, arranged flights. Meanwhile, I had one job, call my parents. Mom picked up on the third ring. I could hear laughter, clinking glasses, party noise. Eric? We're at Patricia's bridal shower. Let me step outside so I can hear you. I told her straight. Diana's gone. Theo's in a coma. I don't know if he's going to make it. There was silence. For a second, I thought she was about to say they'd be there. Instead, she said, Oh my God, Eric, that's horrible. But we can't leave right now. Everyone's here. Timothy's parents, the whole family. We spent so much on this event. It would be humiliating if we just walked out. I pulled the phone away, staring at it like maybe I was hallucinating. Mom, my wife is dead. Your grandson might not wake up. I know, sweetheart, and we're all so sorry. But Patricia's been planning this for months. It's her only bridal shower. Timothy's parents would be offended if we bailed. We'll come tomorrow, okay? Tomorrow? Well, maybe afternoon. Your dad has an interview, and Patricia wanted a brunch to open gifts. But we'll be there as soon as we can. I hung up. Couldn't listen anymore. Hunter came back into the waiting room. Your folks coming? No, bridal shower. He didn't say a word, just nodded, because he already knew what they were like. The next 3 days were hell. Theo had 2 emergency surgeries. I slept in a recliner beside his bed, jolting awake every time a monitor beeped. Diana's parents arrived within hours of Hunter's call. They brought food I couldn't eat, sat with Theo when I couldn't keep my eyes open. They handled funeral arrangements because I couldn't even face it. My parents? They called once for updates, once to say they'd definitely be down after Dad's interview. They never showed. Day 6, Theo opened his eyes for a few seconds, just long enough to squeeze my hand before drifting off again. I cried harder than I did at Diana's funeral. He was alive, and that was enough. Recovery was brutal. My chest-loving kid forgot basic shapes. Some days he didn't recognize me. His left side was weak, like his body had forgotten how to move. Speech therapy, physical therapy, tutoring, all of it became our new normal. I turned our living room into a mini rehab center with mats, flashcards, and balance boards. The bills started stacking like a nightmare. ICU stay, surgeries, rehab, specialized equipment. Even with insurance, I was staring at 6 figures. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., punching numbers into a calculator, trying to make them add up. They didn't. That's when Hunter introduced me to Jeffrey, a personal injury lawyer his cousin swore by. Jeffrey looked at everything. The driver's record, the company's negligence, the fact they still gave him a truck despite multiple violations. This is a strong case, he said. Their commercial insurance has a multi-million-dollar policy. They'll want to settle fast. They can't risk a jury when a mother's dead and a child's brain damaged. I'd never seen a check bigger than 4 zeros. Suddenly, we were talking about amounts that could cover Theo's care forever. Money wasn't going to bring Diana back, but it could make sure Theo never lacked what he needed. A week later, my mom called out of the blue, asking how I was paying for all this therapy and how long I thought I could afford it. Her tone wasn't worry, it was curiosity, like she was fishing. I was tired and didn't have the energy to fight. I just said, "It's handled. Don't worry about it." That was enough. She didn't need details. The silence on the other end told me she'd already started connecting dots. And I knew right then, before the settlement even cleared, that they weren't thinking about Theo at all. They were already thinking about themselves. My life at that point was nothing but hospital chairs, therapy notes, and half-slept nights. I woke up stiff in a recliner most mornings, walked laps around the ICU halls with coffee I didn't even taste, and spent hours sitting by Theo's bed while machines beeped around him. When I wasn't there, I was home turning the living room into rehab space. Balance mats, flashcards taped to the wall, a little stool with hand grips for strength work. Theo's recovery was like watching someone rebuild a house brick by brick. First a finger twitch, then holding a spoon without dropping it, then remembering the word ball after staring at one for 5 minutes. I celebrated every little win like it was the Super Bowl. Diana's parents were my lifeline. They flew in the night of the crash and stayed. They did grocery runs, kept meals ready, rotated shifts at the hospital so I could shower. Hunter was my other anchor, handled bills, cut my grass, made sure the house didn't turn into a jungle while my world sat on pause. The bills came in waves. ICU, surgeries, rehab, equipment. Even with insurance, the numbers were enough to make my chest tighten. At night, I'd sit at the table staring at envelopes like they were bombs waiting to go off. That's when Jeffrey, the lawyer Hunter set me up with, laid it all out. The driver wasn't just careless. He had priors, ignored safety training, and the company still put him in a truck. The employer's commercial insurance had millions in coverage. Jeffrey said they'd settle quick rather than risk a jury trial. The numbers he was talking about didn't feel real, enough to secure Theo's care forever. He structured it smart too, most in a medical trust I couldn't touch except for Theo's care, and a portion for immediate expenses. It was airtight. Diana would have approved. For the first time, I felt like maybe we wouldn't drown. I hadn't told my parents anything. On purpose. I knew the second they smelled money, they'd come circling. But people talk, and that's how it slipped. Hunter's wife, Anna, ran into my mom at the grocery store. My mom did her usual routine, fishing for updates she didn't earn. Anna, being kind, mentioned how relieved everyone was that the lawyer had things handled so I wouldn't have to stress about medical bills forever. She didn't say numbers, didn't brag, just an offhand comment. But for my parents, that was blood in the water. 2 days later, my mom called me all sugary. "We're so glad things are looking better for you. These situations can ruin families if they're not managed right." I knew what she was getting at, so I kept it short. Theo's covered. That's all that matters. She hummed like she was already making notes. Then Dad jumped in, like he'd been waiting on speaker. "Son, we should all sit down and figure out how to handle this. Settlements aren't just about bills. They're about family recovery too." I hung up before saying something I'd regret, but it didn't stop there. Patricia texted me that night. "Mom says you're being selfish. Diana wouldn't want you to keep everything for yourself. Weddings are expensive. Family comes first." She was engaged to Timothy, remember? Bridal shower queen. Using my dead wife's name to guilt me into funding her wedding dress. I nearly threw my phone against the wall. Meanwhile, Jeffrey kept me updated. Settlement negotiations were moving faster than usual. The company wanted this buried. They were offering amounts that made my stomach flip. Life-changing, but also disgusting because of what it was tied to. I should have been relieved. Instead, all I could think was how my parents were probably at their kitchen table, scribbling plans on napkins. They hadn't shown up when Diana died. They hadn't sat through nights in the ICU. They hadn't watched Theo relearn how to say dad. But now that money was in the picture, they were suddenly dialed in. I looked at Theo one night, asleep with his stuffed bear tucked under his arm, and I made myself a promise. This money was for him, for his life. Not 1 cent would go to the people who saw him as a dollar sign. I thought that line in the sand would be enough. I had no idea how far they'd push to cross it. A week after the settlement paperwork was nearly finalized, Jeffrey set up a mediation meeting with the insurance company's lawyers. Nothing unusual, just a standard sit-down to confirm details before money got wired into the trust. It was supposed to be simple. Me, Jeffrey, and a mediator. Instead, my parents showed up. I walked into the conference room and almost turned back around. There was my mom in her church outfit, Dad carrying a thick manila folder like he was about to pitch a startup, and Patricia glued to her phone in a white blazer that still had store tags hanging from the sleeve. And sitting next to them, some nervous-looking guy in an ill-fitting suit. Jeffrey leaned close to me and whispered, You didn't invite them, right? Not a chance. He sighed. Let's see what circus this is. The mediator looked confused but let them sit. My dad immediately started acting like it was his show. He spread out papers, charts, even a poster board with pie graphs. We've done some research on settlement distributions, he began, tapping the board like he was in a boardroom. It's standard for these awards to cover the entire family's suffering, not just the immediate medical needs. I didn't say anything. I just watched. Mom jumped in with her soft voice. We've all carried the stress, Eric. The emotional trauma hasn't just affected you and Theo. We've been through sleepless nights too, worrying, praying. We think the fair approach is a 50-50 split. Jeffrey nearly choked on his coffee. Half, Dad continued, goes to Theo's trust, which makes sense. The other half gets distributed among family members to help everyone recover. Patricia can finally start her life properly. Your mother and I can handle medical needs and retirement planning. It ensures the whole family heals together. Then Patricia spoke up without looking up from her phone. Yeah, and weddings aren't cheap. I'm almost 30 and I've been dealing with constant stress. I can't even focus on content creation with all this drama. If Diana really cared about family, she'd want me taken care of too. The room went dead silent. Jeffrey slowly turned his head toward me like, did she really just say that? Even the mediator shifted uncomfortably in her chair. I leaned forward. What did you just say about Diana? Patricia finally looked up, rolling her eyes. I'm just saying, she was always acting like she was better than us. With her nurse job and perfect little house. If she was such a saint like everyone makes her out to be, she'd want us supported. Don't twist my words. I felt my jaw lock. You insult my dead wife again, and I'll make sure you regret it. All right, Dad cut in quickly, like he was saving her. Let's not get personal. This is about practical solutions. We've brought a financial advisor, Kevin, here, to help guide us. The nervous guy in the bad suit cleared his throat. I was asked to come provide general advice, but this seems more like a legal matter. I don't... Kevin? Mom interrupted, plastering on a fake smile. Family needs guidance in times like these. Jeffrey stood. This meeting is about structuring funds for Theo's medical trust, not about distributing anything to third parties. You're not legal beneficiaries. You don't have standing here. My dad waved him off. You lawyers always talk about technicalities, but this is about family values. You can't just hoard everything when the whole family's suffering. I reached into my folder and pulled out 2 photos I'd kept from the hospital. One was Diana's wrecked car. The other was Theo in the ICU, unconscious with tubes running everywhere. I slid them across the table, covering their pie chart. This, I said quietly, is what you're trying to split. This is what you think you're entitled to. My wife's death and my son's brain injury. Patricia's smirk evaporated. She stared at the photos, face pale. Kevin, the advisor, stood so fast his chair almost fell. I think I should excuse myself. This seems inappropriate. He left, dropping his business card on the table in his rush. My mom tried to regain footing. Eric, don't be dramatic. We've all been impacted. Gas money, missed work. You visited 0 times in 4 months. Not once. Meanwhile, Diana's parents were here every single week, covering shifts so I could breathe. They never asked for a penny. You think you deserve half because you burned gas on the freeway? Get out. Hunter, who had insisted on tagging along just in case, stepped in from the corner. Meeting's over, he said flatly. My parents looked stunned, like they couldn't believe I wasn't playing along. Dad sputtered something about family obligations while Mom gathered her purse. Patricia muttered, "You'll regret this," under her breath as she shuffled out. When the door closed, Jeffrey exhaled. Well, that was new. I've warned clients about greedy relatives, at the burned image of Theo's ICU photo in my head. For the first time since the accident, I felt more anger than grief. I knew one thing leaving that room. My family wasn't just circling anymore. They were actively trying to sink their teeth in. And if they wanted a fight, I was ready to give them one. I didn't even have to wait. Within a week, Patricia had a new project online. A GoFundMe popped up titled, "Help Theo Recover," with a photo of my kid from the hospital. She cropped me out of it, but it was clearly one of the pictures Diana's parents had taken in the ICU to update relatives. The description said donations would go toward medical costs, therapy, and family support. Family support. I knew exactly what that meant. I confronted her over text. Take it down. You don't have permission to use Theo's photo. She replied instantly. Relax. I'm helping. People want to support us. Don't be selfish. Selfish. That word again. The donations started rolling in. Hundreds. then thousands. Except instead of hospital bills, Patricia was posting new selfies with ring lights, makeup hauls, and salon trips. She even bragged about using her platform to honor Diana's memory. I sent the link straight to Jeffrey. He fired off a takedown notice and prepped fraud paperwork just in case. But Patricia didn't stop. Next, she threw a Diana Memorial Beauty pop-up at her salon job. Flyers showed Diana's smiling face with the slogan, "Beauty lives on." They sold products and raffled baskets for Theo's future. None of that money came near Theo. Her boss found out after a furious call from one of Diana's co-workers and shut it down immediately. Patricia stormed online blaming me. Her posts got nastier by the day. Long rants about narcissistic relatives hoarding money, how dead people get worshipped when they weren't saints in life. Anyone who knew our family knew exactly who she was talking about. Comments filled up with relatives saying, "Stay strong, Patricia. We know what you've been through." Mom and Dad weren't far behind. They started calling extended family, painting me as the greedy son who abandoned his parents during tragedy. One voicemail from Uncle Pete said, "You forgot where you came from. That settlement isn't just yours. Family raised you." Funny, because I didn't remember Uncle Pete paying a single hospital bill or sitting by Theo's bed for one night. But the lowest move came when CPS knocked on my door. I opened it to find two caseworkers standing on my porch. "We received a report about possible neglect and misuse of medical funds," one of them said, flipping through a folder. "We need to ask you some questions and see the home environment." I already knew who was behind it. I let them in. Theo was at the table, painstakingly drawing a stick figure with his speech therapist. His therapist looked up, confused, but kept working. I walked the caseworkers through everything: therapy schedules, medical binders, receipts. I showed them the trust paperwork Jeffrey had structured, proving every cent was accounted for. By the time we finished, one of them actually apologized. "This all looks excellent. Honestly, you're more organized than most families we visit." They left shaking their heads at the false report. I wasn't even mad at CPS. They were just doing their job. But the fact my own family tried to drag the state into this, that lit a fire in me I didn't know I had. I called Jeffrey again. He didn't even sound surprised. Unfortunately, when people get desperate, they escalate. Document everything. Every text, every post, every phone call. We'll hit them with cease and desists for defamation and harassment. So that's what I did. I made folders. Dates, screenshots, call logs, Patricia's midnight rants about me, Mom's voicemails dripping guilt, Dad's texts hinting about sharing the burden. It was all proof. But entitlement doesn't back off just because you show strength. They doubled down. Mom called one night while I was sitting with Theo after therapy. He'd just managed to tie his shoes again for the first time since the accident, and we were both celebrating with pizza. My phone buzzed. I let it go to voicemail. Later, I listened. "Eric, I don't know how you sleep at night, keeping everything for yourself while the rest of us struggle. Do you realize how hard it's been for your father's back pain? And Patricia's wedding is falling apart because of the stress. Diana wouldn't want this. She always thought she was better than family. But you should know better. You owe us." That last part, "you owe us," hit me. Not because it was true, but because it confirmed everything. To them, I wasn't a grieving husband or a father fighting for his son. I was just a walking checkbook. Hunter listened to the voicemail and shook his head. "They're not gonna stop, man. You need to draw a line they can't cross." "I already did," I said. "Now I'm gonna enforce it." The next morning, Jeffrey's office sent out formal cease and desist letters to my parents and Patricia. The wording was brutal. Continued harassment would lead to restraining orders, civil suits, even criminal complaints. We weren't playing anymore. I thought maybe that would scare them straight. Instead, it just made them louder. Patricia went live on Instagram, crying fake tears about how her own brother was threatening her with lawyers while she was just trying to honor her sister-in-law's memory. She pinned a comment that said, "Some people only care about money, not family." And the likes rolled in. I sat there watching it, furious, but also strangely calm. Because for every person patting her on the back, there were 3 people from Diana's world. Her co-workers, her patients' families, other parents from Theo's school, commenting things like, "You don't speak for Diana," and "exploiting a child's tragedy is disgusting." The tide was turning, even if Patricia didn't realize it yet. I shut my laptop and looked at Theo across the room, hunched over Legos, piecing together a crooked little house. He looked up, grinned, and said, "Dad, it stands." And in that moment, I knew mine would too. Turns out I didn't even have to lift a finger. Patricia was busy lighting herself on fire in public, and people were done giving her sympathy. First domino was her job. Word about the fake GoFundMe and the Diana Memorial pop-up leaked around town. Parents from Theo's school were furious. Nurses who'd worked with Diana were posting screenshots, and even customers at the salon started leaving bad reviews. One review said, "Imagine letting someone who exploits her dead sister-in-law touch your hair." Management didn't want the heat. Patricia was out. She tried to play it off online, saying she'd left to focus on content full-time. Problem was, her content was nothing but rants about me and half-hearted makeup tutorials in the same hoodie she'd been wearing for a week. Followers started dropping. The people who stuck around weren't fans. They were watching for the train wreck. Then Timothy's family stepped in. They'd been polite during the bridal shower mess, but now they'd seen everything. Her GoFundMe stunt, her lives trashing Diana, even the CPS stunt when that paperwork started floating. Timothy's mom called him, and the engagement ended in about 2 phone calls. The ring went back to the jeweler. The wedding plans evaporated, and Patricia went online claiming classism destroyed true love. Nobody bought it. What she didn't know was Timothy's dad was a partner at a law firm in Tucson. He wasn't about to let his son marry someone who turned herself into a headline. He made sure every HR department in the area knew her name. Word spread fast. Don't hire the woman who harassed a widower and scammed donors. Her applications went straight into trash bins. That was the public side. The private side got uglier. Without her job or Timothy's money coming in, Patricia moved fully back into my parents' place. Rent hadn't been paid in months. Utilities were hanging by threads. Dad's bad back made it easy for him to complain, but not work. Mom was scraping together bookkeeping hours and cleaning gigs, but it wasn't enough. I'd cut them off months earlier, and this was their first real taste of life without me as the family ATM. Mom started leaving me voicemails crying about eviction. "We'll be homeless." This isn't what Diana would want. She left out the part where they'd spent their last savings on a fancy shower for Patricia instead of, I don't know, paying their rent. Neighbors started avoiding them. The church group they leaned on for sympathy quietly backed away after Jeffrey's letters circulated. Nobody wanted to get dragged into lawsuits. Even their so-called friends stopped answering calls when they realized help meant handouts. Patricia, of course, blamed everyone but herself. She posted rants about how I turned the family against her, how Timothy used her, how the salon never appreciated her talent. She went full scorched earth. But the more she screamed, the smaller her audience got. By the end of the summer, her Instagram was basically a ghost town. The GoFundMe donors came next. Enough of them complained that the platform opened a fraud investigation. Money she'd already spent on clothes and electronics had to be refunded. She didn't have it. That turned into court dates. A dozen donors filed official complaints, and the platform froze the campaign. The DA pushed it into a fraud case, and she took a plea: misdemeanor fraud and restitution. The judge gave her probation and mandatory rehab instead of jail. By fall, she was broke, jobless, and infamous in town. People crossed the street to avoid her. And my parents? They were drowning right alongside her. Eviction notices stacked at their door. I heard from a cousin they'd sold off furniture for quick cash. For people who once bragged about their daughter's big future, they were now 3 broke adults fighting over scraps. Meanwhile, my life was moving in the opposite direction. Theo was thriving. His speech therapy was paying off. He could tell full jokes again, and his motor skills were coming back strong. I took him to a park one Saturday, and he climbed the jungle gym without hesitation. Watching him hang from the monkey bars, laughing like nothing had ever happened, I almost broke down. But this time, it was relief. I'd started lifting weights again, eating decent food, remembering I was more than a caretaker. Diana would have wanted that. Hunter checked in daily, and Diana's parents called every week. My circle was small, but it was solid. One night, I scrolled through Facebook and saw Patricia had posted another meltdown. She'd tried applying for a receptionist job at a dentist's office. They Googled her, found the post where she'd drawn devil horns on Diana's photos, and turned her away. Patricia called it harassment. Everyone else called it consequences. Dad tried one more angle. He showed up outside Theo's therapy session, leaning on a cane, begging me to reconsider sharing the settlement. He said, "We're family. Families rebuild together." I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Families show up when it matters." "You didn't." Then I walked right past him. Mom tried too. She called the therapy center pretending to be Theo's emergency contact. They flagged it and warned me immediately. That's when Jeffrey drafted another letter. This one spelling out stalking charges if they didn't back off. The squeeze was finally working. By winter, they were facing eviction with no one left to bail them out. Patricia was unemployable, my parents broke, and every bridge they'd ever had was burned. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel like the bad son or the selfish brother. I just felt free. But people like my family don't stay quiet when their world caves in. They get desperate, and desperation makes them stupid. It was December, a week before Christmas. Theo had just come home from a class holiday party. He was buzzing on sugar cookies and showing me a craft ornament he'd made. For the first time all year, the house actually felt alive again. Then the doorbell rang. It was Patricia, alone. She looked nothing like the girl who used to brag about being an influencer. Hair greasy, hoodie stained, eyes hollow. She'd lost weight, but not in a healthy way. She stood there shivering, clutching her phone like it was a lifeline. "We need to talk," she said. "No, we don't." I tried to shut the door, but she jammed her foot in. "Just 5 minutes, please." Against my better judgment, I let her stand in the entryway. She wasn't stepping farther. Not after everything. She started rambling. I messed up. The posts, the GoFundMe, all of it. I was angry, I was desperate. But you can't just cut us off forever. We're family. We're about to lose the house. Mom's working 3 jobs, Dad's back is shot, and I can't get hired anywhere because of those stupid screenshots. We need help. Just a little. Her voice cracked, but her eyes were still burning with entitlement. I crossed my arms. "You dragged my wife's name through the mud. You tried to steal money meant for my son's recovery? You called CPS on me. And now you want me to cut you a check like none of that happened?" She shifted, defensive. "I didn't mean the CPS thing to go that far. I thought it would scare you into sharing." Diana would have understood. She was compassionate. That was it. I stepped closer, lowered my voice. "Don't you dare say her name again. You spit on her memory for months, and now you want to hide behind her compassion? Diana hated everything you stood for. She saw through you long before I did." Her lip trembled. "So you're really going to let your family be homeless? At Christmas? What kind of man does that? The kind who remembers who showed up when his son was fighting for his life. And it wasn't you." She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "You think you've suffered? You lost a job because you ran your mouth. I lost a wife. My son almost lost his childhood. And you tried to cash in on it. Don't stand in my house and cry like you're the victim. You made your bed. Now choke on it." Her face twisted. "You're heartless." "No," I said, stepping back and opening the door. "I'm done being your bank. I'm done being your punching bag. You, Mom, and Dad, burn this bridge." And I lit the ashes. "Get out before I call the cops and add trespassing to your rap sheet." She looked at me like I'd slapped her. Then the rage came back. "Karma's gonna get you. You can't just walk away from blood." I smiled coldly. "Watch me." She left screaming down the driveway, swearing I'd regret it. I didn't watch her go. I just locked the door. 2 days later, Hunter called. Patricia had been arrested at a bar for fighting another woman. One of the cops at his firehouse filled him in on the details. Public intoxication, assault, probation violation, the whole trifecta. My parents tried to call me for bail money. I didn't even let it ring through. On New Year's Eve, they showed up at my office, looking like they'd aged 20 years in 6 months. Security walked them right back out. That was the last time I saw them. Last I heard, they'd moved into my aunt's place in Flagstaff, sleeping on couches and begging for odd jobs. Patricia was stuck in a court-ordered rehab program. Her social media wiped, her so-called career gone. I didn't feel pity. Not an ounce. They destroyed their own lives. I just stopped protecting them from the consequences. Meanwhile, Theo kept climbing. His therapist said his brain scans looked incredible. Full recovery, just minor motor skill stuff. He started beating me at chess again, bragging about it the way kids do. I let him. Every time he laughed, I thought, that's what the settlement is for. That's what Diana would have wanted. Hunter still checked in every day. Diana's parents called weekly, never asking for anything except to hear Theo's voice. That was family. One night, after Theo fell asleep on the couch surrounded by Legos, I sat in the quiet and thought about everything. The accident, the funeral, the vultures circling, the fights, and for the first time, I didn't feel grief or anger or guilt. I just felt savage satisfaction, because I'd cut the rot out of my life, and I hadn't wavered once. Some people don't deserve forgiveness, no matter how much they suffer. And my family? They'd proven it. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way.